Big time fight coming up this weekend at flyweight. We have a couple of different fighters really trending in different directions. Andrea Lees, who's lost her last 3, and Antonina Shevchenko, who's 3-2 in her last 5. The losses kind of staggered in between, and it's been an interesting level of competition for both of these women, Matt. For Andrea Lees, the last 3 losses: Joanne Calderwood by split decision, Lauren Murphy by split decision, and Roxanne Modafferi by unanimous decision. The scariest thing, if you're a big Andrea Lees supporter, is the support of everybody else for Andrea Lees, especially the gamblers, because these are the odds out of those last 3 fights. Minus 250 against Calderwood, minus 300 against Murphy, minus 320 against Roxanne Modafferi. Are you surprised by that?
Okay, not really, only because I had this point made way in advance. Andrea Lees was the first Wolf ticket contender at 125 pounds that people thought maybe if she can get on a run could beat Valentina. Because here's the thing, people forget, Andrea Lees was like Katlyn Chookagian with a little bit more pop on her shots. She was the original, I'm going to backpedal an awful lot and you're going to walk into my shots for a while. But there was... Now, I'm going to call them a vocal minority, but there definitely was a group of people who thought, hey, if Andrea Lees can make her way to a title shot, she might be able to frustrate the champion and win. Now, I think that was insane at the time. I think we can all look at that in hindsight and say, of course, Valentina would have absolutely dominated Andrea Lees, but there was a time when there's some real hype behind Andrea Lees, and that's why it's kind of wild to see her on this 3-fight losing streak. Because, okay, you lose split decision to Joanne Calderwood, who is a very talented fighter on the feet. The majority of that fight was contested on the feet, no big deal. You lose split decision to Lauren Murphy. That was, again, a very close fight. Now, I have to be completely honest, I did think Calderwood and Murphy both beat her, but again, if you have 2 close fights against 2 other top 5, top 10 talents in the division, it still proves that you belong. And then she fights Roxanne Modafferi. The ultimate litmus test, some might say, because Roxanne's just like, hey, are you either on your way down or on your way up? Roxanne Modafferi is going to help you find out. But Roxanne was just able to really stifle the attack of Andrea Lees. And this is the weird thing. Andrea Lees, I could always just kind of know how she was going to fight. Like I had said, she was the original Katlyn Chookagian. Yes, she backpedaled a lot. She went a lot and didn't hit all the time. But still, she was able to just land such an accumulation of volume on her opponents that at the end, you just kind of knew what the judges were going to say. They were going to be like 30-27 Andrea Lees. She was just going to overwhelm her opponents with volume. But we've seen, at least throughout her last 3 fights, fighters give her zero respect on the feet nowadays. Isn't it interesting? I've never seen a fighter whose career has just switched so drastically. It's kind of like she was at the 3-point line and then people just decided, hey, we'll stand in the paint and we'll just let them shoot 3-pointers. Because for Andrea Lees, once fighters realize I can walk through her power, they've been able to land on her. And when you see fighters like Joanne Calderwood do it, when you see fighters like even Roxanne Modafferi do it, it leaves me reason to believe that Antonina Shevchenko can really just replicate a similar game plan to her last 3 opponents.
The weird thing is, though, for Shevchenko, and you look at it, the 5-on-in, Jiyeon Kim, that's a win. You lose by split to Roxanne Modafferi, the name you brought up. She submits Lucia Pudzilova. She loses to Katlyn Chookagian in a fight where, and this is the weird thing, we've seen Antonina even in the Lipsky fight. I'm a wrestler now. Well, in the fight against Chookagian went, I'm a wrestler now. And Shevchenko had zero answer for it because I bet she thought, hey, she's going to stick and move like every other Katlyn Chookagian fight. And Chookagian did full wear the hood hat, and she went out there and put her wrestling shoes on. Shevchenko gained a lot in her last fight, but again, how good's Ariane Lipsky? The queen of violence? I don't know. Sometimes you're doing the grossest knee bar to Luana Carolina, and sometimes you're losing fights to people that a lot of people haven't heard of. So it's really tough to get a read on her. For Antonina Shevchenko, you know the striking pedigree's there. You know Pavel's going to be in the corner. You know that they're training at a hole-in-the-wall gym, so let's give shouts where they are. At Bushiban over in Texas, outside of Houston. And if you look at it for Andrea Lees, this is the thing that I don't know if it's going to make the biggest difference because she's somebody that's trained in and around the Louisiana, Texas type of areas. She's been training out of Colorado for a bit now, and I got to name out some of the training partners. She's at Pound for Pound Fitness, which is very closely related to Elevation, so you get the same striking coach in Justin Houghton, but also Montana De La Rosa, former opponent of Andrea Lees. Tisha Torres is there. Claire Guthrie. A lot of the same people that you saw in the pictures for Lupi Godinez when she spent just a little bit of time there going, again, Vancouver, Colorado, down to the fight in Florida. For Lupi, you can't blame training on the fight that she had against Jessica Penne. You can blame the judges. But if you look at it, Aspen Ladd, another person there as well to train with. I like to see that out of Andrea Lee, but for Shevchenko, it's been the same old for years, and it works for both these gals.
It is weird. Okay, you had kind of mentioned it. Shevchenko, they're going to bill her as a Muay Thai fighter. They're going to tell you all these great things she did in Muay Thai. She's going to go out there and shoot double legs. It is really weird because for Antonina, they talk about her like she grew up like she was Bruce Lee, like she grew up in the mountains, and she has this 1-inch death punch, but it is weird. We've seen Shevchenko get outclassed in the feet too many times to continue to call her like an MMA or a Muay Thai striker, because that is the thing. I honestly think Andrea Lee is probably going to be able to outstrike Antonina Shevchenko on the feet, but if Antonina Shevchenko can get a takedown, I think she can have good success in top position, which is weird because you would just assume going into this fight, well, okay, Andrea Lee could be backpedaling, and it's going to just come down to can Shevchenko march her down. I really do think this fight comes down more to the takedowns than Shevchenko's ability to cut off the cage, although I do believe both are going to be really important because for Andrea Lee, whether it's a win or a loss, you know how she's going to fight. She is still going to backpedal. She's going to try to land those straight shots. It normally just comes down to the opponent's A, ability to either secure a takedown like Roxanne Modafferi was able to do, or B, close off the cage like Joanne Calderwood was able to do, because that was the one thing Calderwood did really well in that fight. She was able to get Andrea Lee in the clinch and land a lot of elbows up close, because for Lee, she is really good at fighting at distance, but she's another one of those fighters who, if you get on the inside of her distance, she doesn't have great elbows, doesn't have great knees, so you can kind of stifle some of her offense. I think if Shevchenko does try to get this into the clinch, go for some of those body trips and whatnot, I think Shevchenko should be able to have another big win.
So if you look at the odds for this one, they're relatively close. Lee open a plus 120. She's now at a plus 110. For Shevchenko, open around a minus 150. She's a minus 134. If we look at the Topology votes at the same time as you do, wow. 1,040 total votes, 82% Shevchenko, 81% by decision. For the 18% that have Lee, 87% by decision. So you go from being 2.5 to 3-1 underdog, favorite in your last 3 fights, losing them. Now you're a decent sized underdog, and the fan vote has totally swayed over to Shevchenko. Like, this is crazy.
You know what you're getting with Andrea Lee, and that's the problem. Again, once opponents figured out that, hey, she might be a striker, but there's no threat with her strikes. Like, you can walk through everything Andrea Lee throws at you. Look at Joanne Calderwood. Like, she was able to do that. Look at the Montana De La Rosa fight as well. De La Rosa was getting dominated at distance, but she was able to get in close on a few occasions against Lee. Now, yes, as that fight progressed, there's the one thing about Andrea Lee that I haven't given her credit for. Great cardio. Phenomenal cardio. Anyone who can move backwards like that while still striking is going to have really good cardio. But again, at the end of the day, I just think it comes down to who's not only the more aggressive fighter, but who's the fighter who lands the majority of their shots at the end of the day. Shevchenko, I do think, will be landing a lot more than she's missing, and I do think if either fighter is able to secure a takedown, it's going to be Shevchenko in this matchup.
I have a really hard time with this fight, again, because are we not giving enough credit to Lee? Are we giving too much to Shevchenko? We've seen Shevchenko lose to Chookagian. We've also seen Lee lose to top fighters. Murphy was our 2020 Fighter of the Year. You got to look at Calderwood. I mean, she was right in that title contention. And then tricky old Roxanne Modafferi, who gave both of these women fits. So it is really tough. I will slightly side again with Shevchenko because I've seen those added wrinkles to her game, but it is a tricky one for me.
Andrea Lee's like Tyler Hansborough. You're like, wow, you were really good before you got to the big leagues. And that really was the case because Andrea Lee was so hyped up on her way into the UFC. I don't really think people understand. Like, you're even given the face. Andrea Lee really was like not the prospect, but like one of the contenders at this division when it was first created. Now, yes, the fact that she's on a 3-fight losing streak is going to cloud that, but people do have to understand, like, Andrea Lee was that girl at this division for a long time. I just don't think she is the answer for Shevchenko in this one.
Matt, not a big Bobcats fan, not an Adam Morrison guy. Could we make that comp? Could we make that comp? But really interesting fight. We're both going with Antonina Shevchenko to get the win. Tricky fight. Really looking forward to it at lightweight. Big fight. For the title, Charles Oliveira taking on Michael Chandler. Holy smokes, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.